Newton's first law of motion is also known as the law of inertia. And the law of inertia states that objects in motion will stay in motion at a constant velocity, and objects at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by outside forces. Here's an example of an object staying in motion. This is a pickup truck with a trailer stuck in the main lane of traffic here. You're going to watch this area right here. Okay, and one more time, slowly. What you're watching is a motorcycle crashing into the back of that pickup truck. And the rider is staying in motion, is continuing in motion because of his inertia. Here's an example of an object staying at rest. Here we have two men on a motorcycle. You want to pay attention to the rider on the back of that motorcycle. Okay? As the rider in front and the motorcycle accelerated, the rider in the back stayed where he was because of inertia. The mass and weight of his body, more specifically the mass of his body, caused him to remain at rest because the force applied by the seat to him was not great enough to continue. The rider in front was able to hold on, he was applying force, and stay with the motorcycle. We have a couple vocabulary words for you here. The first one is inertia. Inertia is the tendency of an object to resist changing its motion. Basically, if it's not moving, it's not going to move. If it is moving, it's going to keep moving until something acts on either of the objects. Okay, second one is a force. This should be a review for you. A force is simply a push or a pull. And we measure force in science in a unit called newtons. Here are a couple of the forces that change motion. The first is friction. Friction has several different types. The first is air resistance. You may have experienced this while you've run on a windy day. If you run into the wind, it's much more difficult to run at full speed than it is if you run with the wind. An example of the second one there of sliding friction would be pushing objects across the floor, sliding your book across the desk. Those are examples of sliding friction. The sliding friction, or all the friction, actually, is a resistance to movement in the direction opposite of movement. So the friction of when you walk is whichever way you're not moving. The last one there is rolling friction. This is typically experienced in automobiles, which is why most of the movable parts of a car that have to do with movement are greased. That grease reduces the amount of friction that the car experiences. Gravity. Well, we really shouldn't have to say much about gravity other than a few things that you may not have known. If something has mass, it has gravity. So, you have gravity, the chair has gravity. Whatever you're listening to this little video with, it has gravity. The atoms that make up that stuff that we've mentioned, those all have gravity also. So basically the easy thing to remember here is that if it has mass, it has gravity. Alright. Just to wrap up here, a couple of things just to make sure. Inertia is the tendency of an object to resist change in motion. So, again, if it's not moving, it's not going to move. If it is moving, it should keep moving unless there's a force acting on it. Something that we may not have covered yet. The more mass an object has, the more inertia it has. So, an example of that would be a freight train or a railroad train moving at, say, 40 kilometers an hour versus a car going 40 kilometers an hour. Which one do you think is harder to stop? Well, which one has more mass? If this is true that more mass has more inertia, the obvious answer should be that the freight train has a larger larger inertia and therefore is harder to stop. Alright, well, I hope this